By the time the billionaire realized his company's seal was on the eviction notice, 12,000 strangers were already watching a single mother lose her home in real time. The video began with a shaking phone, a narrow apartment hallway, and a little boy coughing into the sleeve of a jacket that was too thin for a Baltimore morning in November. Nobody watching knew his name yet. Nobody knew the woman standing in front of apartment 3B had worked a 12-hour night shift before coming home to find 2 sheriff's deputies at her door. All they saw was a black single mother holding a brown shoebox against her chest, while a property manager in a beige coat read from a clipboard like she was announcing the weather. "Ma'am, you need to vacate the unit now." Naomi Reed did not scream. That was the first thing people noticed. Her face was tired, her eyes swollen from a night without sleep, her nursing home badge still clipped crookedly to her jacket, but she stood straight. Behind her, 8-year-old Maya held her little brother Caleb's hand and kept whispering, "Don't cough too hard, okay?" As if a child could negotiate with asthma. The hallway smelled like old carpet, radiator heat, and rainwater tracked in from the stairwell. Someone's dog barked behind a closed door. Someone else cracked their apartment open just enough to watch without being seen. The woman filming was a neighbor named Tasha, and her voice trembled as she spoke to the phone. "Y'all, they're really putting her out. She got kids. She just got off work. Look at this." The live stream counter climbed from 312 to 1,900 in less than a minute. Comments slid up the screen faster than anyone could read them. Some people typed prayers. Some typed jokes. Some asked what she had done wrong, because the world always wants the wounded to explain why they are bleeding. Naomi shifted the shoebox higher against her chest. "I have receipts," she said, not loudly, not dramatically, just carefully, like every word had to survive inspection. "I filed the hardship protection form. I paid what the office told me to pay. I have the stamped copy right here." Denise Caldwell, the regional property manager, did not look at the shoebox. She looked at the deputy. "The order is valid." "Then let me show it," Naomi said. "Let me show the paper." Her daughter bent down to pick up a blue inhaler that had slipped from Caleb's pocket. The boy's breath made a small rough sound that disappeared under the noise of the hallway. That was when, 3 miles away, in the back seat of a black Maybach idling outside City Hall, Julian Mercer saw the live stream for the first time. He was 42 years old, dressed in a charcoal suit, on his way to give a speech about affordable housing and dignity. On the seat beside him sat a leather folder with polished remarks his communications team had spent 2 weeks perfecting. At the top of the first page were the words, "No family should ever be made invisible by the system meant to protect them." Julian had planned to say that line slowly. He had planned to pause after it. He had planned to let the cameras catch the conviction in his face. Then his assistant, Evan, leaned forward from the front passenger seat and said, "Mr. Mercer, you need to see this." Julian almost waved him off. He had a mayor waiting, donors waiting, a room full of reporters waiting. But then Evan turned the phone around, and Julian saw the name in the comments. Mercer Housing Trust. His company. His promise. His mother's old dream dressed up as a billion-dollar institution. On the screen, Naomi Reed was now kneeling on the hallway floor because someone had knocked the shoebox from her hands. Papers had spilled everywhere. Rent receipts. Hospital bills. A school photo with bent corners. A folded letter with blue ink. Maya was trying to gather them before people stepped on them. Caleb stood beside her with one hand on the wall, coughing into his sleeve again, quieter this time, as if he had learned that even breathing could be inconvenient to adults in charge. Julian reached for the phone. "Zoom in," he said. Evan pinched the screen with 2 fingers. The image sharpened just enough for Julian to see the eviction notice taped to Naomi's door. White paper. Black letters. Red stamp. First he saw only the company name. Then he saw the circular seal pressed near the bottom, the raised mark used only for executive-level property actions. A seal locked inside a restricted system. A seal that was never supposed to appear on a family eviction without review. Julian's hand went still. The driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror, but said nothing. On the live stream, Denise Caldwell's voice came through cold and flat. "Remove the remaining belongings from the unit." Naomi stood up slowly. One receipt clung to the wet bottom of her shoe. She peeled it off, smoothed it against her palm, and looked straight at the notice on the door. "That paper is lying," she said. Nobody in the hallway answered. Online, the viewer count passed 12,000. Outside City Hall, Julian Mercer forgot the speech in his lap, forgot the mayor, forgot the cameras waiting for him to talk about compassion. He brought the phone closer until the red seal filled the screen, and for the first time that morning, the billionaire who owned the building did not look powerful. He looked afraid, because that was his seal. But he had never signed that notice. Naomi Reed woke up at 4:38 in the morning because the radiator in apartment 3B had started knocking inside the wall like a fist. Not loud enough to wake the children, just loud enough to pull her out of the shallow piece of sleep she had been holding on to since 2:11. She opened her eyes in the dark and did not move for 3 seconds. 3 seconds was all she allowed herself before the day could begin asking things from her. The room was cold around the edges, the kind of cold that found the gap beneath the window frame and slid across the floor. Caleb was asleep on the small mattress beside the couch, one arm thrown over his face, his breathing soft but uneven. Maya was curled under a faded purple blanket on the pull-out sofa, her school shirt folded on the chair beside her because she liked to dress herself now and Naomi let her, even when the buttons ended up uneven. Naomi sat up slowly. Her back ached from lifting patients at Rosebridge Senior Care all night. 12 hours on a floor where the lights never dimmed and the call buttons never stopped. Her shoes were still by the door, white soles gray from hospital hallways. The left one split a little at the side. She had meant to glue it again. She had meant to do a lot of things. On the kitchen counter, beside the cereal box with less than a cup left inside, sat the brown shoebox. It was not special. It had once held Maya's winter boots from a clearance rack 2 years earlier. Now it held the only defense Naomi had against a world that kept asking her for proof. Rent receipts folded by month. Money order stubs. Printed emails from the housing office. A hospital discharge paper from Caleb's last asthma flare. A letter from the school nurse. A copy of the hardship protection form stamped received 3 weeks earlier at 9:17 in the morning by Mercer Housing Trust, Ridgeway Court Office. Naomi had written the date on the outside of the folder in blue pen and circled it twice. She did not trust herself to remember everything anymore, not because she was careless, but because exhaustion had a way of stealing details and then making you look guilty for losing them. She stood and crossed the apartment quietly. The floor creaked near the sink, so she stepped around that board the way she always did. Apartment 3B was small, but Naomi knew every weak place in it. She knew which cabinet door had to be lifted before it closed. She knew the bathroom faucet needed to be turned past hot and back again if you wanted warm water. She knew the window over Maya's side of the room whistled when the wind came from the east. She knew the patch of ceiling above the stove was not just stained, no matter how many times the property office called it cosmetic. Still, every Saturday she wiped the counters with lemon cleaner, swept the hallway outside her door even though it was not her job, and kept a small plastic plant on the windowsill because Maya said it made the apartment look like a real home. Naomi filled the kettle halfway and set it on the stove. She opened the cabinet. 1 packet of instant oatmeal, 2 slices of bread, peanut butter scraped thin at the bottom of the jar, and a can of peaches she was saving for Friday because Friday was supposed to feel like something different. She split the oatmeal into 2 bowls and added extra water so both children would have enough. She made toast for Maya and cut Caleb's slice into 4 squares because he still ate better when food looked small. She did not make anything for herself. She told herself she would eat at work later. She had been telling herself that for 11 days. Her phone buzzed on the counter before the kettle started to steam. She picked it up fast so it would not wake the children. The screen was cracked across the corner, a thin white line running through the time. A reminder from the school app. Maya's field trip permission slip was due today, along with $9. Naomi stared at the message, then looked at the small ceramic mug by the sink where she kept loose change. 3 quarters for dimes, 2 nickels and 7 pennies. $1.22. She turned the phone face down. Not because she was ignoring it. Because some numbers needed to sit quietly for a minute before they could be faced. Caleb coughed once in his sleep. Naomi was beside him before the second cough came. She touched his forehead, then his back, counting the rhythm of his breathing the way the emergency room nurse had taught her. In for 2, out for 3. His inhaler lay on the milk crate beside the mattress, wrapped with a rubber band around the spacer so the pieces would not separate in the dark. She picked it up, checked the counter and held it to the light. Almost empty. She had called the pharmacy twice. Insurance would cover the refill on Monday. Today was Thursday. 4 days could feel like a year when your child's chest decided not to cooperate. Caleb shifted but did not wake. Naomi tucked the blanket around his shoulders and pressed her lips to his hair. He smelled like cocoa butter and sleep. At 4:57, Maya opened her eyes. She did not ask why her mother was already awake. Children in apartments like Ridgeway Court learned early that mothers were always awake in some part of themselves. Maya sat up, rubbed her face and looked toward the kitchen. Is it oatmeal day? It is oatmeal day, Naomi whispered. With cinnamon? Naomi smiled. There was no cinnamon. It had run out 2 weeks ago. She reached for the tiny bottle anyway, tapped the side over both bowls, and let the last invisible dust fall like a blessing. With a little cinnamon. Maya accepted this with the generous faith of an 8-year-old who had not yet learned to count disappointment too closely. She got dressed while Naomi helped Caleb into his sweatshirt. The boy frowned at the sleeves because they were a little short now, but he did not complain. Naomi noticed that. She noticed everything her children had stopped asking for. New shoes, juice boxes, a birthday cake from the grocery store instead of cupcakes made from mix, a ride to school when it rained. Children did not always announce sacrifice. Sometimes they just became quiet around the things they wanted. At 5:26, Naomi opened the shoebox and checked the folder again. Money order receipt from September. Partial payment receipt from October. Email confirming hardship review. Copy of the form. Hospital paper. School nurse note. She slid them into order, then slid them out and checked again. Her hands were cracked at the knuckles from sanitizer and cleaning solution. She rubbed lotion into them from a travel bottle she had refilled so many times the label had peeled off. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a crab, was Maya's drawing of their apartment building with 3 stick figures in the window and a sun above the roof. Under it Maya had written "Our home" in careful letters. Naomi looked at it longer than she meant to. Then she took the final notice from behind the cereal box. She had hidden it there the night before after the children went to sleep, folding it twice so the red letters would not show. Final notice to vacate. Balance due. Failure to comply. Legal possession. Words that made a person sound like a problem to be removed. She smoothed the paper with both hands. The amount listed was wrong. It included late fees she had disputed, court fees she had never been properly served, and a charge for maintenance damage from the bathroom leak she had reported 3 times. The office had told her to bring documentation. She had documentation. The office had told her to file hardship protection. She had filed it. The office had told her someone would call. Nobody called. That was why today mattered. If she could get to the housing office before her day shift at the hotel, if she could put the stamp copy in front of a real person, if someone would look at her instead of through her, maybe the notice would stop being a threat and become what it really was. A mistake. At 6:05 they left the apartment. Naomi locked the door twice and tested the knob once. Even though the lock stuck and testing it made her late. Habit was not fear. Habit was how she kept small disasters from becoming large ones. The hallway light flickered above them. On the second-floor landing, Mrs. Alvarez from 2A was carrying laundry in a basket against her hip. She looked at Naomi's shoebox, then at her face, and her expression softened in a way that made Naomi look away quickly. Pity was heavier when it came from someone who understood. "You want me to walk Maya to school?" Mrs. Alvarez asked. "I can take both of them." Naomi almost said no. Pride rose first, quick and automatic. Then Caleb coughed, and Maya looked up at her with her backpack already sliding off one shoulder. Naomi swallowed the no. "Just to the corner," she said. "I have to go by the office." Mrs. Alvarez nodded like she knew not to ask more. Outside, Baltimore was still gray. The sun had not cleared the roofs yet. The sidewalk was damp from rain overnight, and cars hissed by on the avenue with headlights on. Ridgeway Court sat behind a chain-link fence that leaned near the entrance, a brick building with old windows and a courtyard where the grass grew in patches. People called it run down. Naomi called it where her children knew which neighbors were safe, where Maya had learned to ride a scooter, where Caleb had taped paper snowflakes to the window last December, where the mailman knew to knock twice because the mailbox door did not close. Home did not have to be perfect to be loved. At 6:18, Naomi hugged both children outside the building. Maya held on longer than usual. "Are we okay, Mama?" Naomi looked at her daughter's face, at the small worry line between her eyebrows that no child should have yet. She wanted to say yes in a way that would make it true. Instead, she touched Maya's cheek and gave her the kind of promise she could still control. "I am going to handle what I can handle today. You go learn something good." Maya nodded because she had heard that answer before. Caleb lifted his arms, and Naomi crouched so he could wrap them around her neck. His little backpack bumped against her shoulder. "Bring peaches later?" he asked. Naomi closed her eyes for half a second. "The can in the cabinet. Friday. Something different." "I will try, baby." After they walked off with Mrs. Alvarez, Naomi stood alone at the gate with the shoebox in both hands. The building behind her made its usual sounds. Pipes. Doors. A baby crying somewhere above. Life continuing because life did not pause for fear. She turned toward the property office at the front of the complex and rehearsed the sentence in her head. "My name is Naomi Reed. I live in apartment 3B. I have proof that this eviction should be reviewed." She said it silently once, then again, until the words felt steady enough to carry. But when she reached the office, the blinds were drawn. A printed sign had been taped inside the glass. "Closed for staff training." Naomi stood there and read it twice. Her phone said 6:31. The office was supposed to open at 6:30 on Thursdays. She knocked anyway. No answer. She knocked again, softer this time, not because she believed someone had not heard, but because dignity sometimes made a person polite even at the door that was failing them. Behind the glass, on the counter she could not reach, sat a stack of blank maintenance forms, a bowl of wrapped peppermints, and a framed slogan with the Mercer Housing Trust logo at the bottom. Housing with dignity. Naomi looked at those 3 words until they blurred. Then she tightened her grip on the shoebox and turned back toward Building 3, where a white notice had already been taped to her door. Julian Mercer had built his entire public life around one sentence his mother used to say when the heat went out in their apartment. "A home is not charity, baby. A home is the floor you stand on while you become somebody." He was 9 years old the first time he heard it, sitting at a kitchen table in East Baltimore with a math worksheet under his elbow, and a towel stuffed beneath the window to keep the winter air out. His mother, Elaine Mercer, had been wearing her blue housekeeping uniform from St. Agnes Hospital, her hands red from disinfectant, her feet swollen inside shoes she had bought one size too large because they were cheaper that way. The landlord had not fixed the furnace for 6 days. Elaine had called every morning before work and every evening after work, voice calm, words careful, never begging, never shouting, because she understood what men with keys could do when poor tenants made themselves too loud. Julian remembered that more clearly than he remembered birthdays. He remembered the sound of his mother boiling water on the stove, and pouring it into mugs just to warm their hands. He remembered her hanging blankets over the bedroom doorway. He remembered watching her sign a rent check with fingers that trembled from cold, not because she owed less, but because she knew paying did not guarantee being treated like a person. That was the wound he had turned into a company. By 42, Julian owned more than 38,000 housing units across 6 states through Mercer Urban Housing Trust, a name printed on apartment signs, city reports, press releases, and the polished brass wall behind the reception desk on the 26th floor of his headquarters downtown. Reporters called him the billionaire who made affordable housing respectable to investors. Mayors called him a partner. Banks called him disciplined. Tenants, at least in the videos his media team showed him, called him different. That word had followed him for years. Different. Not like the developers who bought old buildings, pushed people out, painted the brick, raised the rents, and called displacement progress. Julian told himself he was not that kind of man. His company renovated leaking roofs, replaced broken elevators, added security lights, opened community rooms, partnered with health clinics, and issued annual impact reports with pictures of smiling families in clean hallways. The reports were always thick. The language was always humane. The charts always moved in the right direction. And because Julian wanted to believe in the thing he had built, he often let the charts speak louder than the people whose lives were inside them. That morning, before the live stream reached his phone, He stood in his penthouse bathroom under soft white lights while a television in the wall played a local news segment about the city housing summit. His suit jacket hung from a cedar hanger behind him. His speech rested on the marble counter, printed on heavy cream paper, each page marked with small notes from his communications director. Pause here. Look up here. Mention Elaine here. Julian buttoned his cuffs slowly. He still kept one of his mother's old rent receipts in a frame inside his closet, not where guests could see it, not where cameras could turn it into a symbol, but where he had to pass it every morning before stepping into the life that receipt had helped create. The paper was from March 1994, $87.50 written in blue ink, paid in cash to a landlord who still filed a late warning 2 days later. Elaine had kept it for years. Never let anyone tell you your memory is not evidence, she had said. Julian had loved that sentence once. Then he built a company so large that evidence became something filtered through dashboards, compliance summaries, risk scores, and legal reviews prepared by people who had never stood in a leasing office with a child on their hip and fear in their throat. His driver arrived at 7:10. By 7:22, Julian was in the back seat of the Maybach moving through Baltimore traffic toward City Hall. Outside the tinted glass, the city was still waking up. A delivery truck blocked one lane near Lexington Market. A woman in scrubs hurried across the crosswalk with a paper cup of coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. A man swept cigarette butts from the sidewalk in front of a corner store. Julian noticed them in the way powerful people sometimes notice life, as scenery on the way to decisions. He opened the leather folder and read the first paragraph again. When we speak about housing, we are not speaking about buildings. We are speaking about stability, health, education, safety, and the right of every family to be seen. He had written that line himself. His team had wanted something shorter. Julian insisted it stay. He believed it. That was the problem. Belief had made him proud. Pride had made him trusting. Trusting had made him blind. On the tablet beside him was a report his executive team had delivered the night before. Tenant transition completed. Ridgeway Court portfolio. 80 pages. Color-coded. Legally reviewed. Board approved. The summary said relocation outreach had been completed for affected households, hardship cases had been screened, vulnerable tenants had been flagged, and all pending actions were compliant with internal policy. Julian had skimmed it after midnight, his eyes tired, his mind already on the speech. He remembered one green check mark after another. He remembered the phrase "no material exceptions." He remembered feeling relieved. Ridgeway Court had been politically sensitive from the beginning. The buildings were old, repairs were expensive, and the land sat inside a redevelopment corridor the city wanted cleaned up before the new transit expansion. Julian had told the board they would not repeat the old model. No silent displacement. No pressure tactics. No fee stacking. No families removed without review. Victor Sloan, his chief asset officer, had nodded through every meeting and said the right things in the calm voice that made wealthy men sound ethical while protecting margins. Denise Caldwell's regional office had submitted forms on time. Legal had signed off. The city wanted progress. Investors wanted certainty. The board wanted the buildings vacant enough to begin phase 1 by Monday. Julian had one responsibility that morning: stand at the podium and make the system sound worthy of trust. His phone buzzed once. Then again. Then Evan Pierce, his assistant, turned in the front seat with a look Julian rarely saw on him. Evan was 29, precise, loyal, and usually careful not to interrupt unless a problem had already become expensive. "Sir," he said, holding up his phone, "there is a live stream from Ridgeway Court." Julian did not take it at first. "Send it to Community Relations. They are tagging the company. Then send it to legal." Evan swallowed. "There are children in the hallway." That made Julian look up. Not enough to understand. Just enough to be irritated by the timing of human pain arriving before a public speech about human dignity. "What unit?" he asked. Evan looked back at the screen. 3B. Tenant name appears to be Naomi Reed. Julian searched his memory and found nothing. No face. No case. No warning. To him, Naomi Reed was not yet a woman with cracked hands, a son with an almost empty inhaler, a daughter learning how to gather receipts from a dirty hallway floor. She was a name that should have been handled somewhere below him, Inside the vast machinery built to protect people like her from ever needing his attention. That machinery had a logo. It had policies. It had annual audits. It had his mother's story at the center of its brand. Julian finally took the phone. For a moment, all he saw was a shaky image and too many comments. Then the camera moved and the notice on the door came into view. His company name was at the top. His seal was at the bottom. The same seal locked behind executive authorization. The same seal he had ordered restricted after promising the city no hardship household would be cleared by automation alone. Julian felt a coldness move through him that had nothing to do with the November air outside. He looked down at the unread report beside him. 80 pages of clean language. One hallway full of ruin. The Maybach rolled toward City Hall, where people were waiting to applaud him for building a better system, and Julian Mercer stared at the screen as the first terrible question formed in his mind. If the system had done this with his seal, what else had it done with his silence? The first collision between Julian Mercer and Naomi Reed did not happen face to face. It happened through a phone screen, through a trembling live stream, through one piece of paper taped to a door that had suddenly become heavier than any speech waiting for him at City Hall. In the hallway of Ridgeway Court, Denise Caldwell stepped forward with the tired impatience of someone who had decided the human part of the morning was already taking too long. Her beige coat was buttoned to the neck. Her hair was pinned neatly. Her clipboard was held flat against her chest like a shield. Ms. Reed, I am going to ask you one final time to remove your personal belongings from the unit. Naomi stood with the brown shoebox pressed against her ribs, but the lid no longer sat straight. One corner had bent when the papers spilled. A rent receipt stuck out from the side, blue ink visible along the fold. I am not refusing to leave because I do not understand, Naomi said. Her voice was calm, but every word carried the weight of a person who had repeated herself to too many desks. I am asking you to read what I already gave your office. Denise looked past her, toward the open apartment door. Inside, the home was small and ordinary in the way homes become precious only when someone else is trying to take them. A pink backpack hung from the knob of a closet door. 2 cereal bowls sat rinsed in the dish rack. A child's winter drawing was taped to the refrigerator. The couch blanket had been folded before Naomi left that morning, because even on the worst day of her life, she had made the room decent. Denise did not enter the apartment. She did not need to. To her, the unit had already become a file number, a move-out status, a space to clear before Monday. The balance was not satisfied, she said. The court order has been processed. The balance is wrong. Naomi reached into the shoebox and pulled out a folded money order stub. This payment was accepted. This fee was under review. This form was stamped by your office. She lifted another page. I have the hardship protection copy. A man from maintenance, standing by the wall with a plastic tote, shifted his weight and looked down. The sheriff's deputy near the stairwell kept his face neutral. Mrs. Alvarez stood at the end of the hallway holding Caleb's backpack in both hands, her eyes wet but her mouth closed, as if speaking might break something that could not be repaired. Tasha continued filming from near the stairs. She has the papers right there, Tasha said, not to anyone in the hallway exactly, but to the phone, to the strangers, to the world beyond. The building that had never cared about Ridgeway Court until suffering had a live viewer count. The number had climbed past 14,000. The comments moved like rain. Show the paper. Let her talk. Where are the kids supposed to go? Mercer needs to answer. Denise turned toward Tasha. You are interfering with an official process. Tasha did not lower the phone. I am standing in a hallway. The words were simple, but something in them made Naomi look up for half a second. Not gratitude. Not relief. Recognition. One woman refusing to disappear while another was being erased. 3 miles away, Julian watched the exchange from the back seat of his car. The phone held so tightly that his thumb had gone pale at the joint. Evan was already dialing the regional office from his own phone. The driver had pulled to the curb 2 blocks from City Hall without being asked. Through the windshield, banners for the housing summit moved softly in the morning wind. Inside the car, nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Julian said, "Put Denise Caldwell on the line." Evan nodded and pressed the phone to his ear. "I am trying her direct number." On the live stream, Denise reached for the notice taped to the door and pointed to the bottom. This action was approved at the executive level. Naomi turned toward the paper. Then the executive level needs to explain why it approved a lie. The sentence went through Julian like a hand closing around his chest. Not because it was loud, because it was precise. He had sat across from governors, union heads, bank presidents, federal officials, men who wore power like a tailored coat. None of them had ever spoken to his company with more moral clarity than the exhausted woman in a hallway holding a shoebox. Evan lowered his phone. She is not answering. Call Victor. Evan did. Julian kept watching. Denise had now taken a step closer to Naomi, her voice lower, controlled for the camera. Ms. Reed, you have had several opportunities to engage with tenant transition services. Naomi opened the shoebox fully. Papers rose almost to the lid, each folder tab handwritten, each receipt flattened from being carried too many times. I came on October 3rd. I came on October 10th. I called on October 17th, 19th, and 24th. I emailed the hardship form. I brought a copy in person. Your office stamped it received. She pulled out a page and held it up. The paper trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the strain of holding her arm steady while everyone watched. This is your stamp. Denise did not reach for it. That was the moment that changed the feeling in the hallway. Not the notice. Not the order. Not even the children standing behind Mrs. Alvarez now. Maya with her lips pressed tight and Caleb with both hands around his inhaler. It was Denise not reaching for the proof. Everyone saw it. Tasha's camera saw it. Julian saw it. The viewers saw it. A woman had brought evidence, and the system would not even touch it. Naomi lowered the paper slowly. You do not want to know if I am telling the truth, she said. You only want me out before somebody has to admit I am. Denise's expression tightened. That is enough. She gestured toward the maintenance men. Begin with the living room. One of the men hesitated. He was young, maybe 23, wearing work gloves too clean to have done much work yet that morning. He looked from Denise to Naomi and then into the apartment, where a small bookshelf made of pressed wood leaned under library books and children's workbooks. He stepped forward, then stopped when Maya slipped past Mrs. Alvarez and moved to the apartment doorway. Please do not take my science project, she said. Her voice was small but not childish. It was the voice of a child who had learned that adults sometimes needed very specific instructions to protect what mattered. It is due tomorrow. Naomi turned quickly. Maya, baby, go back with Mrs. Alvarez. Maya did not move. In her hands was a cardboard shoebox lid covered in aluminum foil, cotton balls, and painted popsicle sticks. A third-grade model of a winter cloud system. Julian stared at the screen. The city outside his car went silent in his mind. He remembered being 9 years old, carrying a poster board project through cold air because his mother had stayed up after her second shift helping him glue cotton to construction paper. He remembered how carefully she had wrapped it in a garbage bag, so the snow would not ruin it. He remembered arriving at school with his fingers numb and feeling proud anyway. On the live stream, Naomi set her shoebox down carefully, crouched in front of her daughter, and touched the side of her face. Listen to me. Nobody is going to throw away your work. She said it as a promise, not because she knew she could keep it, but because mothers sometimes had to speak protection into rooms where none existed. Then Denise made the mistake Julian would remember for years. She looked at the child's project and said, "Put it with the rest of the items." The hallway changed again. Mrs. Alvarez made a sound under her breath. Tasha whispered, "Wow." The young maintenance worker looked away. Maya held the project tighter, and Caleb began to cough. Not loud, not dramatic, just a rough little sound that made Naomi's head turn instantly. She moved to him, searched his pocket, checked the inhaler and shook it once. The hollow plastic rattle was barely audible through the live stream, but Julian heard it as if it had happened beside him in the car. Evan's phone connected. Mr. Sloan is on. Julian did not take his eyes off the screen. Victor, he said, his voice low. Why is my executive seal on a Ridgeway Court eviction notice for apartment 3B? There was a pause long enough to become an answer. Then Victor Sloan said, smooth as glass, Julian, do not react to a live stream. I have the file. The tenant is non-compliant. On the screen, Naomi was holding the stamped hardship form toward Denise again. "Look at it," she said. "Just look at it." Denise kept her hands on the clipboard. Victor continued in Julian's ear. "Everything was reviewed. This is a sensitive portfolio. We cannot let one viral situation disrupt a compliant transition." Julian looked at the paper in Naomi's hand, then at the notice on the door, then at the seal that carried his authority into a hallway he had never bothered to visit. "She is holding a stamped hardship form," Julian said. Victor exhaled softly. "People hold all kinds of papers when they are out of options." That was the line. Quiet. Polished. Cruel without raising its voice. Julian turned his head slowly toward the window, where City Hall waited with flags, cameras, and a podium bearing his company logo. For the first time that morning, he understood that the opposite of dignity was not always insult. Sometimes it was a man in a boardroom deciding which papers counted and which people did not. In the hallway, Naomi placed the hardship form flat against the eviction notice, covering the red seal with the stamp from the office. For one brief second, the two marks touched, the stamp of a woman who had followed every rule, and the seal of a man whose system was breaking them. Tasha's camera caught it. Julian saw it. The internet saw it. Naomi looked at the notice, then at Denise, and said, "If his name is strong enough to put us out, it should be strong enough to make someone read the truth." Julian ended the call with Victor without saying goodbye. Then he opened the car door. Julian Mercer did not get back into the Maybach. He stood on the sidewalk outside City Hall with the phone in one hand and the speech folder in the other, while traffic moved around him like the city had no idea something inside him had just broken open. A security aide stepped toward him and said the mayor's staff was asking whether he wanted to enter through the front doors or the side entrance. Julian did not answer. On the phone screen, the hallway at Ridgeway Court had become smaller and more crowded. Neighbors stood at both ends, not blocking anyone, just watching the kind of thing people watch when they know silence will make them guilty later. Denise Caldwell was speaking to someone off camera. The maintenance crew had begun carrying out small items first, the things that made a home look embarrassingly human once they were placed in public. A laundry basket with folded children's clothes, a plastic container of crayons, a lamp with no shade, a grocery bag of clean towels, Maya's aluminum foil science project now resting on top of a cardboard box as if it had been demoted from schoolwork to debris. Naomi stood beside the wall with Caleb in front of her, one hand on his shoulder, the other gripping the shoebox so tightly the cardboard bowed inward. She was not fighting. She was not pleading. She was watching every object cross the threshold, memorizing what the system took first. Julian heard Evan behind him saying, "Sir, we have 6 minutes before you are scheduled to speak." Julian looked down at the first page of the speech. The words about dignity stared back at him with a cleanliness that suddenly felt offensive. He folded the page once, then again, and slid it into his coat pocket. "Cancel it." Evan blinked. "The speech. Do not cancel. Delay. Tell them I have an urgent property matter. They will ask what kind." Julian kept his eyes on the live stream. A maintenance worker was carrying a small white air purifier from the apartment. Caleb reached for it without thinking, then stopped himself. "Tell them the kind we say we exist to prevent." Evan did not move for half a second. Then he nodded and stepped away, already dialing. Julian turned toward the curb where his driver waited with the back door open. "Not City Hall," Julian said. "Ridgeway Court." The driver looked at him once in the mirror after they pulled away, then took the next right without a word. Inside the car, Julian opened his company tablet and searched Naomi Reed. The tenant management portal loaded with the cold efficiency of a system built to make human emergencies look sortable. Unit 3B. Ridgeway Court. Leaseholder. Naomi Denise Reed. Household, 3 occupants. Balance due, $2,840.16. Status, legal possession granted. Tenant transition category, non-compliant. Outreach outcome, declined assistance. Vulnerability status, none verified. Julian read the last line twice. None verified. On the live stream, Caleb was coughing again. Not violently, not dramatically, just enough for Naomi to crouch in front of him and count his breaths with her fingers against his sleeve. None verified. Julian tapped the document history. A series of entries appeared, Each one clean, brief, final. Notice issued. Payment plan offered. Tenant failed to complete. Hardship review incomplete. Legal review approved. Executive seal applied. He opened the payment. Up. September rent paid in full. October partial payment accepted. Late fees added. Maintenance charge added. Court filing fee added. Administrative compliance fee added. He stared at the fee stack. It was not illegal on its face. That was how these things survived. Each charge looked small enough to defend alone, but together they became a wall a working mother could not climb. He clicked on the hardship section. A red banner appeared. No valid hardship documents on file. Julian felt a small release of breath leave him, not relief exactly, but the first shape of an explanation. If there were no documents on file, then perhaps the woman on the live stream was holding copies that had never been uploaded. Perhaps the local office had lost them. Perhaps Denise was following what the system showed her. Perhaps this was failure, not malice. It was almost comforting. He hated himself for wanting it to be comforting. Evan slid into the back seat beside him at the next light, closing the door quickly. "The mayor's office is not happy," he said. "The board is calling. Victor has called 4 times. Do not answer Victor yet." Julian handed him the tablet. "Pull the activity logs for the hardship folder." Evan worked quickly. He had the kind of hands that could type under pressure without shaking. "There was an upload attempt on October 10th, he said. "It shows rejected. Reason: unreadable file." "Who marked it unreadable?" Evan paused. "Regional office user. Initial DC. Denise Caldwell." Julian looked back at the live stream. Denise was now standing with her phone to her ear near the apartment door, turned partly away from the camera, her posture stiff. She did not look like a woman caught doing something wrong. She looked like a woman annoyed that wrong had become visible. Julian opened the scanned copy attached to the rejected file. The image was not unreadable. It was slightly crooked. The stamp at the top was clear enough. Received. Ridgeway Court Leasing Office. October 10th. 9:17 a.m. The same date Naomi had said. The same stamp she had held in the hallway. Julian touched the screen with one finger, enlarging the bottom corner. There was handwriting there. Small and rushed. Tenant reports child with asthma. Requests review before legal action. He sat back slowly. Outside, the Maybach crossed under an overpass, the light changing from gray morning to shadow and back again. Evan watched his face. "What does it say?" Julian did not answer right away. He opened the call log tied to the tenant file. 14 calls from Naomi's number over 5 weeks. 9 marked unresolved. 3 marked left voicemail. 2 marked tenant disconnected. He clicked one. The recording had been saved automatically. A thin, tired voice filled the car. "Hello. This is Naomi Reed in apartment 3B. I am calling again because I received a letter saying my hardship form is incomplete, but I brought it to the office last week and the woman at the desk stamped my copy. My son has asthma, and I was told that means someone has to review it before any lockout. Please call me back. I work nights, so if I do not answer, please leave a message. I am not refusing to pay. I am trying to fix this." The recording ended. The car stayed silent. Julian felt something old move inside him, not memory exactly, but the shape of memory. His mother standing at a pay phone outside a laundromat, holding a receipt in one hand and speaking politely to a landlord who had already decided not to hear her. He opened the next call. Naomi again. More tired. "I am checking because I got another fee added, and I do not know what maintenance damage means. The bathroom leak was already there. I have pictures from when I moved in. Please, I need someone to explain what I am supposed to do next." He stopped the recording before it finished. He was not ready for the third. Evan looked out the window. "This is bad." "This is one file," Julian said, but he heard the weakness in his own voice. "One file can be a mistake." Evan did not answer. He did not need to. The tablet was already telling them it was not just one mistake. The entries had patterns. Same regional user. Same rejected hardship upload. Same transition category. Same fast-track legal approval. Julian searched for the code attached to Naomi's notice. Priority clearance. The system returned a policy document from 6 Months earlier. Ridgeway Court Vacant Delivery Protocol. Authorized by Asset Management. Designed to streamline unit turnover before renovation mobilization. Julian had never seen the title. Or worse, he had seen it in a report and not understood what the words would mean when they arrived at someone's door. He opened the approval chain. Victor Sloan's name appeared twice. Denise Caldwell's name appeared 6 times. Julian's own initials appeared at the bottom beside the executive seal authorization. JM. He stared at those 2 letters until they no longer looked like initials. They looked like a verdict. I did not approve this, he said. Evan leaned closer. It says delegated executive seal. That seal cannot be delegated. Apparently it can. Julian turned sharply. Evan lowered his voice. I mean, the system appears to allow it. The livestream sound rose. Tasha had moved closer to Naomi. Ms. Reed, did they ever offer you relocation help? Naomi looked at the camera, then away, as if speaking to strangers cost her more than standing before Denise. They sent a brochure, she said. It had numbers. I called. 1 mailbox was full. One person said I made too much for one program and not enough for another. One said the waiting list was closed. That was the help. Did you refuse assistance? Tasha asked. Naomi's face changed just slightly. Not anger. A deeper kind of insult. I refused nothing. I asked for a meeting. Julian looked at the portal again. Outreach outcome. Declined assistance. The phrase sat there neat and false. 3 words that could turn a mother asking for time into a tenant causing trouble. The Maybach was 10 minutes from Ridgeway Court when Victor Sloan's name lit up Evan's phone again. This time Julian held out his hand. Evan gave it to him. Victor. Julian, where are you? Victor's voice was calm but hurried underneath. The mayor's office is asking questions, and this live stream is being clipped all over social media. We need to contain it. I am on my way to Ridgeway Court. Silence. Then Victor said, that is not advisable. Why is there a rejected hardship form in Naomi Reed's file that is clearly readable? Victor did not miss a beat. Those files are reviewed at the regional level. Why does the portal say no vulnerability verified when the form mentions a child with asthma? Medical verification requires proper documentation. She has a hospital discharge paper. Julian, people attach all kinds of things. We cannot freeze an entire redevelopment because one tenant knows how to perform for a camera. Julian looked up from the tablet. The words did not sound exactly like cruelty. That made them worse. They sounded like training. Like boardroom language. Like a system teaching people how to dismiss pain without sounding heartless. Do you know her? Julian asked. Victor exhaled. What? Naomi Reed. Have you met her? Of course not. That is not my function. Then do not tell me what she is performing. Another pause. You are emotional right now. Julian almost laughed, but nothing about the moment was funny. On the live stream, Naomi was picking up Maya's school papers from the floor where one had been stepped on, smoothing the wrinkled page against her thigh. A child's handwriting. A weather chart. Little blue clouds drawn across the top. No, Julian said quietly. I am late. He ended the call. Evan looked at him. Late for what? Julian did not answer because the answer was too large for the backseat of a car. Late to the building. Late to the file. Late to the woman his system had named non-compliant because she kept asking to be seen. He opened one more tab, the audit trail for the seal. There should have been a biometric confirmation, a password token, a compliance note. Instead, there was a short entry from 2 nights earlier at 11:46 p.m. auto-authorized under executive delegation rule. Batch clearance. Ridgeway Court. 31 units. Julian stopped breathing for 1 second. 31. Not 1. 31 doors. 31 files. 31 possible shoeboxes. He clicked the list, but before it loaded, the livestream shifted. Denise had returned to Naomi with a printed document in her hand. Ms. Reed, she said, loud enough for the camera now, your file shows you declined tenant transition services on 3 separate occasions. Naomi stared at her. For the first time all morning, the careful steadiness in her face cracked. Not into tears. Into disbelief. That is not true. Denise held up the paper. It is in the record. Naomi looked down at the shoebox, then at her daughter, then at the notice on the door. Then the record is lying too. Julian's car turned onto the avenue leading toward Ridgeway Court. The viewer count crossed 20,000. The 31-unit list finally loaded on his tablet, and every name carried the same clean phrase beside it. Declined assistance. Julian saw a wheelchair accommodation note on one file, an insulin refrigeration note on another, a school transportation hardship on a third. Then he saw Naomi Reed's name near the top, highlighted by the system because he had opened it already. Beside her unit number in the approval column were 2 letters and 1 word that made the whole car feel smaller. JM seal approved. Julian looked from those letters to the live stream, where Naomi Reed stood in a hallway fighting a lie with a damaged shoebox full of truth, and understood that someone had not merely made a mistake. Someone had learned how to make his authority look like silence. Naomi Reed did not start keeping papers because she loved proof. She started because the first time a grown person behind a desk told her there was no record of what she had said. She was 24 years old, holding a newborn Maya in one arm and a hospital bill in the other, and she learned something that never left her. If you were poor, your word was not a record. Your pain was not a record. Your memory was not a record. A record was a stamp, a signature, a receipt, a date, a confirmation number written on the back of an envelope while a baby cried against your shoulder. That was why the brown shoebox existed. Long before it sat in the hallway of Ridgeway Court like the last wall between Naomi and the street, it had lived under her bed, then on a kitchen shelf, then in the top of the closet where Maya could not reach it. It had once been ordinary, just a box from a pair of winter boots Naomi bought for her daughter at a discount store off Pulaski Highway. The boots were pink with silver stars on the sides. 2 sizes too big because Naomi said children grow into things faster than money grows back. Maya had worn them through 3 winters, first with thick socks, then with thin socks, then with her toes curled at the ends until Naomi found a better pair at a church clothing drive. The empty box stayed. At first, Naomi used it for birth certificates and immunization cards. Then the box became rent receipts. Then medical papers. Then letters from school. Then printed emails. Then photographs of ceiling stains and bathroom leaks, and the small black line of mold that kept returning no matter how many times she scrubbed it with bleach until her eyes watered. The box grew heavier each year, not because Naomi's life was falling apart all at once, but because it was being worn down in pieces too small for people with comfortable lives to recognize as emergencies. 5 years earlier, apartment 3B had felt like a beginning. Naomi had moved in on a Saturday afternoon in June with a borrowed pickup truck, 2 plastic bins of clothes, 1 mattress, 1 second-hand couch, and Maya sitting on the floor eating crackers from a paper towel because the kitchen table had not arrived yet. Caleb was still a baby then, round-cheeked and quiet, asleep against Naomi's chest in a carrier while she carried grocery bags up 3 flights because the elevator had been broken that week. She remembered standing in the middle of the empty living room and feeling proud. Not joyful exactly. Joy felt too delicate for what she had survived. Proud. The kind of pride that comes when you sign a lease with your own name after months of sleeping in a cousin's spare room, and pretending the arrangement is temporary before everyone gets tired of the lie. Her husband, Marcus Reed, had left 6 months before the move. He did not leave in one dramatic storm. He disappeared in ordinary pieces. First he stayed out later. Then he stopped answering texts. Then his paycheck stopped coming into the shared account. Then one morning Naomi found half his clothes gone, and a note on the counter that said he needed to get himself together and would call when he could. He did not call for 3 weeks. When he finally did, he said he was in Atlanta, that work was better there, that he would send money once he got steady. The money came twice. $100 in July. $75 in September. After that, promises. After that, silence with a familiar voice. Naomi did not have the luxury of collapsing. Maya needed school forms. Caleb needed diapers. Rent needed paying. The world did not pause because a man had decided fatherhood was too heavy to carry. Naomi went back to work at Rosebridge Senior Care, first part-time, then full-time, then nights because nights paid $1.75 more an hour. She learned how to lift elderly patients without hurting their shoulders. She learned which residents were afraid of the dark, and which ones would not eat unless someone sat beside them for the first 3 bites. She learned to smile at families who visited once a month and complained about folded towels. She learned to sleep between 9:30 in the morning and 1:10 in the afternoon, while Caleb napped and Maya was at school. Her phone volume turned all the way up in case the nurse called. For a while the math almost worked. Not comfortably. Never comfortably. But enough. Rent first. Electricity second. Childcare third. Bus pass. Food. Phone. A little toward the hospital bill. Nothing left but nothing missing. Naomi became skilled at making ordinary life appear stable. She bought chicken thighs when they were on sale and stretched them into soup. She filled school snack bags with store-brand crackers and wrote Maya's name on them in black marker, as if the marker could make them special. She learned which pharmacy coupon app worked for Caleb's inhaler, and which urgent care would let her pay $20 at the visit and bill the rest. On Sundays she washed both children's hair, laid out uniforms, and placed $7 in quarters in a small envelope for laundry. She kept the apartment clean. She kept appointments. She kept promises whenever promises were within the reach of her hands. Then Ridgeway Court changed owners. The first letter came on thick paper with a blue logo at the top. Mercer Housing Trust. The language sounded almost kind. New investment. Improved living. Conditions. Resident support. Community renewal. Naomi read it twice at the kitchen table while Caleb colored beside her and Maya practiced spelling words. She wanted to believe it. Everyone in Building 3 wanted to believe it. The hallway lights had needed fixing for months. The front entrance lock stuck open. The laundry room had 2 working machines for 40 families. A company with money sounded like help. For the first few weeks there were signs of it. Men in reflective vests walked the property with tablets. A woman from the office passed out flyers about tenant transition services. Someone painted the leasing office door. Then rent statements changed. A trash service fee appeared. Then a pest compliance fee. Then a maintenance damage charge for the bathroom leak Naomi had reported 3 times before Mercer ever bought the building. She went to the office with photographs on her phone, and the old maintenance request numbers written on an index card. The woman at the desk looked at the screen for less than 5 seconds and said, "You will need to upload that through the portal." Naomi said she did not have a computer. The woman said the portal worked on phones. Naomi looked down at her crack screen and said thank you because saying what she felt would not lower the balance. She tried the portal that night after work, standing in the kitchen at 2:34 in the morning with her uniform still on and her feet aching through her socks. The photos would not load. The file was too large. She resized it. The screen froze. She tried again. Caleb woke up coughing. The upload failed. By dawn she had sent 3 pictures and a message that ended with, "Please confirm you received this." No one confirmed. In September Caleb's asthma got worse. It started with a school nurse call on a Tuesday. By Thursday night, his breathing was shallow enough that Naomi left work early and took the bus to urgent care with him wrapped in a blanket on her lap. The doctor sent them to the emergency room. The emergency room kept him until morning. Naomi missed a shift at Rosebridge and a weekend cleaning job at the hotel. The missed hours became missing money. The missing money became partial rent. Partial rent became late fees. Late fees became a balance with a tone, a number that made the office speak to her differently. Naomi did not hide. She went in before work with $180 in money orders and her discharge papers in a folder. She told the woman at the desk exactly what happened. "My son was in the hospital. I can pay the rest next Friday. I am requesting hardship review." The woman slid a form toward her and said, "Fill this out and bring documentation." Naomi filled it out standing at the counter because there were no chairs in the office, only 2 plants, a candy bowl, and a framed statement about dignity. She attached the hospital paper, the school nurse note, and copies of her pay stubs. The woman stamped the top page received. October 10th, 9:17 a.m. The sound of that stamp hitting paper was small, but Naomi remembered feeling her shoulders drop for the first time in weeks. A stamp meant someone had to acknowledge she had been there. A stamp meant the story had entered the record. She placed the copy in the brown shoebox when she got home, between the rent receipts and Maya's school photo. That night, she let the children share the can of peaches she had been saving. Not because the problem was solved but because hope when it came deserved a little syrup in a bowl. But the letters kept coming. The first one said incomplete documentation. The second said payment plan default. The third set final notice. Naomi called. She left messages. She went to the office before her shift and after her shift. Once she brought Caleb with her because he had a half day at school, and he sat on the floor by her shoes pushing a toy car back and forth while Naomi waited 43 minutes for Denise Caldwell, only to be told Miss Caldwell was in a meeting. Another time, Naomi arrived with her uniform under her coat and her hair still damp from the shower, and the office door was locked for lunch though the sign said open. Every time she returned to apartment 3B, the shoebox gained something. A new call log. A new printed email from the library. A new receipt for a payment that did not seem to make the balance smaller. The box became the place where Naomi stored not only proof, but restraint. All the things she wanted to say but could not afford to say. I am not lazy. I am not lying. I am not trying to get something for free. I am tired. I am trying. I am still here. The heaviest paper in the box was not the rent ledger or the hardship form. It was a letter Naomi wrote one night at the kitchen table after Maya and Caleb had fallen asleep. She wrote it on lined paper from Maya's school notebook because printer paper had run out. To whom it may concern, she began, then crossed that out because it sounded too distant, too cold, like writing into an empty room. She started again. My name is Naomi Reed. I live in apartment 3B with my daughter Maya, age 8, and my son Caleb, age 5. I am not refusing to pay. I am asking for time, and for someone to review the documents I already gave your office. My son has asthma. I work nights at Rosebridge Senior Care and weekends when I can. I have lived here 5 years. My children go to school from this address. This is not just a unit to us. This is our home. She stopped there because the word home made her throat tighten. She did not mail the letter. She folded it and placed it in the shoebox anyway. Some part of her wanted there to be a record that she had tried to explain herself like a person, not a case number. The week before the notice appeared on her door, Naomi took Maya and Caleb to the public library on Orland Street, because the apartment internet had been shut off for 2 days and Maya needed to finish a school weather chart. Caleb sat at the children's table with crayons while Naomi used a library computer to check the portal. Her case status had changed. Hardship review incomplete. Tenant transition services declined. Naomi stared at the words so long the screen dimmed. Declined. She clicked the Outreach tab. 3 entries appeared with dates and times. Tenant declined relocation call. Tenant declined payment counseling. Tenant declined medical review. Naomi had been at work during the first time. On the bus during the second. In the emergency room pharmacy line during the third. Nobody had spoken to her. Nobody had offered anything for her to decline. She asked the librarian how to print the page. It cost 15 cents. Naomi paid with a quarter and told the librarian to keep the change because her hands were shaking, and she did not want Maya to see her counting pennies. That printed page went into the shoebox too. She did not understand then that the false words were not just a mistake. She thought if she showed someone the call logs, the stamped form, the proof, the wrong sentence would be corrected. She still believed the system could be embarrassed into honesty. On the morning everything broke open, after the closed office sign and before Tasha began filming, Naomi returned to apartment 3B and found the notice already taped to her door. Maya and Caleb were still with Mrs. Alvarez. The hallway was empty. For a moment, Naomi stood alone in front of the paper. She did not touch it. She read her name, her unit number, the balance, the order, the seal. Then she unlocked the door, stepped inside, and did what she had trained herself to do when panic rose too high. She made the children's beds. She rinsed the breakfast bowls. She placed Caleb's extra sweatshirt in his backpack. She moved Maya's science project from the table to the shelf so it would not get bent. Only then did she take the shoebox from the counter. She opened it and checked the contents in order. Birth certificates, lease, receipts, hospital paper, school nurse letter, hardship form, portal printout, unmailed letter. She pressed the lid down and held the box against her chest. It was not just paperwork anymore. It was 5 years of being told to prove what should have been believed. It was every hour she had worked through pain, every call she had made on a lunch break, every polite sentence she had spoken to someone paid not to hear her. When the deputy arrived, when Denise stepped into the hallway, when neighbors opened their doors and the first phone lifted to record, Naomi did not have power, money, or a lawyer beside her. She had a damaged shoebox, a child's inhaler, and the stubborn dignity of a woman who knew the truth had weight, even when no one wanted to carry it. And inside that shoebox, between a hospital discharge paper and a rent receipt from September, lay the stamped hardship form that someone in Julian Mercer's system had already marked as unreadable, incomplete, and safe to ignore. By 8:14 in the morning, the eviction at Ridgeway Court was no longer a hallway incident. It was a public event, a corporate problem, a city embarrassment, and for Naomi Reed, it was still the same simple terror it had been from the moment she saw the notice on her door. Where will my children sleep tonight? The question did not appear in the Livestream comments. It did not show up in the tenant portal. It was not written in the legal order or spoken by Denise Caldwell, or carried in the polished language Victor Sloan used on conference calls. But it lived in Naomi's chest with every breath Caleb took, and every time Maya looked toward the apartment as another piece of their life crossed the threshold. The maintenance workers had stopped pretending the process was gentle. Not because they were cruel men, but because once a home is officially treated like property, even careful hands begin to move like the clock matters more than the person. A box of school supplies was placed near the stairwell. A trash bag of winter clothes leaned against the wall. The small white air purifier sat on the floor beside a lamp, its cord wrapped around it like a tired arm. Naomi watched one worker carry out a laundry basket with folded towels and the blue blanket Caleb used when his breathing was bad. She stepped forward before she could stop herself. "Please keep that one clean," she said. The worker froze, then looked at the blanket as if he had suddenly realized it was not an item. It was comfort. It was sick nights on the couch. It was a mother sitting awake at 3 o'clock in the morning counting a child's breaths. He nodded once and set it on top of the box instead of the floor. Denise saw the pause and lifted her voice. "Everything needs to be cleared from the unit before 11. Naomi turned toward her. 11. Denise checked her clipboard. "The crew is scheduled to secure the unit. Anything not removed by then will be documented for storage or disposal according to policy. My children are at school." Naomi's voice stayed steady, but her face had gone very still. "Their things are inside. That is why we advise tenants to prepare in advance." The words landed harder than shouting would have. Prepare in advance. As if Naomi had not prepared receipts, forms, pay stubs, hospital papers, school notes, call logs, photographs, copies, folders, and every piece of herself that could be made presentable to a system that kept moving the door. "You closed the office this morning," Naomi said. "I came to talk to someone." Denise did not look away. The legal process did not begin this morning. Tasha, still filming from near the stairs, whispered, "She came to the office. I saw her." A neighbor behind her said, "A lot of us saw her." Denise's jaw tightened. "This is not a public meeting." "It is now," Tasha said. Outside the building, the rain that had held off all morning began to fall again, lightly at first, tapping against the stairwell windows and the metal railing. Someone had propped open the front door for the workers, and damp air climbed the stairs, bringing with it the smell of wet concrete and city traffic. Caleb coughed, then leaned against Mrs. Alvarez's side. Naomi heard it and moved to him, but Mrs. Alvarez placed a hand on her arm. "I have him," she said softly. "You handle them. Handle them." Naomi almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the task was impossible. How does one woman handle a property manager, a legal order, a false record, a sick child, a frightened daughter, a crowd, a camera, a missing office, a rising balance, and a billionaire seal on a notice that says her home no longer belongs to her? Downstairs, a second van pulled up to the curb. 2 men in dark jackets got out, both wearing badges clipped to their belts with Mercer Housing Trust printed beneath their names. Denise saw them through the stairwell window and exhaled like help had arrived. "Finally," she muttered. Naomi saw the logo and felt the hallway tilt slightly. More company people. More official voices. More records that would likely say she declined what she had never been offered. The men came up the stairs with tablets in their hands. The taller one introduced himself to Denise in a low voice as Mark Ellison from Asset Compliance. The other, younger and silent, began taking photos of the hallway, the boxes, the door, the notice, Naomi's belongings. Naomi stepped in front of Maya's science project. "Why are you photographing my children's things?" Mark looked at her with the careful expression of someone trained to sound respectful without giving ground. For inventory purposes. Inventory for what? Items removed during possession are documented. Possession, Naomi repeated. She looked at the apartment door. That is what you call it when you take someone's home while they are standing there? Mark did not answer. He looked down at his tablet. Ms. Reed, we are here to confirm whether there are any immediate safety issues or personal documents that need to be separated from the remaining property. Naomi held up the shoebox. I separated them. Weeks ago. Good, Mark said, as if she had cooperated with a procedure instead of survived one. Do you have identification? Naomi blinked. For what? To verify your release forms for storage. I am not signing storage forms. Then unsecured items may not be preserved. Maya looked up quickly. Mama, what does that mean? Naomi did not take her eyes off Mark. It means they are trying to make me sign something I have not read. Mark's face cooled. Refusal to sign will be noted. So note this too, Naomi said, lifting the shoebox higher. I did not refuse help. I did not refuse a meeting. I did not refuse a payment plan. I refused to lie for your paperwork. Tasha's camera caught the sentence. Online the comments surged again, but the internet did not stop the clock. At 8:27, Denise received a text message that changed her posture. She turned away from the live stream, read it and smiled slightly, not with happiness but with confirmation. Then she looked at Mark. Renovation walkthrough has been moved up. Mark frowned. To when? 10:30. Naomi heard it. So did Tasha. So did Julian, 8 blocks away in the back seat of the Maybach, staring at the tablet where the 31-unit list had finally loaded. Evan was calling names from the file, his voice low and disturbed. Unit 1A has a wheelchair accommodation note. Unit 2C has a dialysis transportation note. Unit 4B has 2 minors and a pending rental assistance application. Unit 5D shows elderly tenant 76. Julian scrolled faster. Every file had the same clean ending. Declined assistance, no verified vulnerability, legal eligible, clearance approved. It was not a housing transition. It was a sweep. Then Evan's phone buzzed with an internal message forwarded from a staff thread. Renovation walkthrough accelerated to 10:30. Ensure units are vacant for investor visual review. Julian read the sentence once. Then again. Investor visual review. He looked out the window at the wet Baltimore streets, at the bus shelter where 2 women in scrubs waited under a cracked plastic roof, at the row houses with damp brick and sagging steps, at the city his company claimed to understand. Investor visual review, he said quietly. They are putting families out for a walkthrough. Evan swallowed. It appears phase 1 presentation depends on vacancy confirmation. Who moved it up? Evan checked. Victor's office. Julian's mouth tightened. Call the site. Tell them nothing else leaves that unit until I get there. Evan dialed. No answer. He dialed Denise. No answer. He dialed Mark Ellison. It went to voicemail. Julian took his own phone and called Victor again. This time Victor answered immediately. Julian, I need you to listen before you do something that damages the entire redevelopment. Did you move an investor walkthrough to 10:30? The schedule adjusted. That is normal. There are families still in the building. There are holdover units creating risk for the closing. You mean tenants? I mean unresolved occupancies. Julian closed his eyes briefly. The words were doing exactly what they were designed to do. Removing people from the sentence made removing them from the building easier. Stop the walkthrough. We cannot. The financing group is already en route. The city expects progress. The board expects proof that Ridgeway is moving. If we miss this window, we risk triggering delay. Penalties. Then trigger them. Victor's voice hardened for the first time. You are reacting to one viral mother with a shoebox. Julian looked at the live stream again. Naomi was now kneeling near a box on the hallway floor, sorting children's papers into one pile and medical supplies into another while rain blew in from the stairwell and dampened the edges of everything. No, Julian said. I am reacting to 31 files that all say the same lie. There was silence on the line. Not confusion. Calculation. Victor knew. Julian understood that in the silence before Victor spoke again. You are seeing incomplete context. I am seeing my initials. Executive delegation is permitted under the emergency clearance framework. I never approved that framework. It was included in the quarterly operations packet. Julian opened his eyes. He could see it now, not the document itself but the way it must have happened. A packet of 70 pages. A summary table. Words like efficiency and timeline, risk and portfolio stabilization. His signature on the cover. His attention on 5 other crises. His trust placed in men who knew how to hide a moral decision inside operational language. You buried it, Julian said. We implemented a board-reviewed process. You used my seal. We protected the project. From whom? Julian asked. Victor did not answer. In the hallway, the deadline began to show itself in small, ruthless ways. Mark Ellison taped a printed inventory sheet to Naomi's door. Denise told the workers to move faster. The younger compliance officer placed red stickers on boxes that could be transported to storage and yellow stickers on items he said were not eligible. Maya's science project received a yellow sticker. Naomi peeled it off immediately. No, she said. The young man looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, school projects are not typically classified as essential personal property. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. She built that after dinner for 3 nights while I sat beside her filling out your forms. He looked down at the tablet. I am sorry. Then act like it. The words surprised even Naomi. They came out quiet, but the hallway heard them. The young man's face changed. He reached for the yellow sticker, crumpled it in his hand and said nothing. Denise saw it. Ryan, she said sharply. Follow the protocol. Ryan nodded, but he did not put another sticker on the project. That tiny refusal did not save Naomi's home. It did not stop the crew. But it mattered because for 1 second, protocol had met a child's cardboard clouds and lost. Then the school called. Naomi's phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She almost ignored it, but the name on the screen made her answer. Hello. She listened, one hand still on the shoebox. Yes, this is Maya and Caleb's mother. Her face changed slowly, the way a face changes when fear finds a new door. Mrs. Alvarez watched her. What is it? Naomi covered the phone. The school saw the live stream. She turned slightly away from the camera, but the microphone still caught pieces. No, they are safe with me. No, we are not on the street. No, please do not call emergency placement. I am handling it. Maya looked from her mother to Tasha's phone. Caleb clutched the blue blanket against his chest. Naomi's voice broke for the first time, not into crying but into urgency. Please do not separate my children from me because my landlord made a paperwork mistake. The hallway went still. There it was. The thing more terrifying than losing the apartment. The thing beneath every box, every fee, every form, every polite sentence Naomi had spoken that morning. Not just homelessness. Not just public shame. The possibility that poverty would be mistaken for neglect. That a mother who had worked herself nearly hollow to keep her children fed, bathed, clothed, medicated, and in school could be judged unfit because a corporation placed her belongings in a hallway before breakfast. Naomi listened, nodding though the person on the phone could not see her. I understand. I understand. I can provide an address by this afternoon. I just need time. Time. The one thing everyone with power kept taking. When she ended the call, her hand was shaking. Maya stepped close. Are they mad at us? Naomi crouched in front of her daughter and forced her voice to become a floor again. No, baby. Nobody is. Mad at you. Are we going to a shelter? Caleb asked. Naomi looked at his inhaler, then at the air purifier, then at the rain darkening the cardboard boxes by the stairs. She had no answer she could give him without lying. So she held both children for a moment, one arm around each, the shoebox pressed between them like a third child made of paper. On the live stream, 28,000 people watched a mother try to make herself bigger than the system closing around her. In the Maybach, Julian heard the school call through the phone speaker and went completely still. He had expected legal exposure. He had expected public outrage. He had expected an operations failure. He had not expected the sound of Naomi Reed saying, "Please do not separate my children from me," because somewhere inside him, despite all his policies, He had still been thinking like a man who owned buildings instead of a man whose decisions could reach into a family and pull it apart. How far? He asked the driver. For minutes, the driver said. Julian looked at Evan. Call the school. Tell them Mercer Housing Trust is taking responsibility for an administrative error, and that the family remains housed pending executive review. Evan nodded quickly. Do we have authority to say remains housed? Julian looked back at the live stream. Denise had just told the workers the investor team would arrive in less than 2 hours. Mark was asking Naomi to sign a storage refusal form. Caleb's blanket was damp at the corner. Maya was holding her science project with both arms. We do now, Julian said. But Ridgeway Court was already visible through the windshield. And at the front entrance, another black vehicle had just pulled up. Victor Sloan stepped out beneath a large umbrella, adjusted his coat, and looked toward the building as if he had arrived to solve a scheduling problem, not answer for a human disaster. Denise saw him from the stairwell window and straightened. Naomi saw the umbrella first, then the polished shoes, then the man walking toward the building with 2 assistants behind him. She did not know his name yet. She only knew the way everyone with a badge suddenly made room for him. Julian's car stopped at the curb behind Victor's. For one brief second, both men stood outside Ridgeway Court in the rain, one carrying the system that had created the deadline, the other finally close enough to see what the deadline was doing. Upstairs, Denise checked her watch and said, We have less than 2 hours. Naomi held the shoebox tighter, because by then she understood the truth more clearly than anyone in a boardroom ever had. They were not just trying to take her apartment. They were trying to make the evidence disappear before the right person arrived. The moment Julian Mercer stepped into Ridgeway Court, the building did not grow quiet. That would have been too simple. The building changed its breathing. Doors stayed cracked open. Phones lifted higher. The rain tapped against the stairwell windows. Somewhere above, a baby cried once and stopped. Victor Sloan saw Julian first and walked toward him quickly. Umbrella still open though they were now inside the front entrance. Julian, he said, keeping his voice low. We should speak privately before you go upstairs. Julian did not slow down. Is Naomi Reed still in apartment 3B? The team is managing the possession. That was not my question. Victor folded the umbrella with a sharp little snap. Yes. For the moment. Then we are going upstairs. Victor stepped in front of him at the first landing. Not blocking him fully, just enough to make the gesture look like guidance instead of obstruction. There are cameras. There are residents filming. Anything you say up there becomes a statement. Julian looked at him. Good. The word was quiet, but it moved through Victor's face like cold water. On the 3rd floor, Naomi heard shoes on the stairs before she saw anyone. Polished shoes. More than one pair. The hallway had entered a strange pause. The maintenance workers stood near the apartment door, hands empty. Denise Caldwell held her clipboard against her body, but her confidence had thinned. Mark Ellison kept looking down at his tablet as if the right instruction might appear if he waited long enough. Tasha's livestream was still running, now with more than 34,000 viewers. Maya sat on a box beside Mrs. Alvarez with the science project in her lap. Caleb had the blue blanket around his shoulders and the air purifier at his feet, unplugged and useless. Naomi stood beside the door with the shoebox in her arms. She had stopped asking them to read the papers. There was only so many times a woman could offer the truth to closed hands. Julian reached the top stair and saw her clearly for the first time, not through pixels, not through comments, not as a file, not as a crisis. A woman in a nursing home jacket with tired eyes and cracked hands. A mother standing between her children, and a hallway full of people who kept using official words for something that looked a lot like abandonment. For 1 second, he saw Elaine Mercer in 1994, holding a rent receipt and lowering her voice so her son would not hear the fear. Then Naomi turned and saw him. She recognized him immediately, not because she followed billionaire real estate news, but because his face was on the framed posters in the leasing office, on the welcome packet, on the community renewal brochure that promised residents would be treated with dignity. The same face, the same company, the same seal. She did not look relieved. That was the first thing Julian noticed. She looked as if the storm had finally decided to introduce itself. Denise moved quickly. Mr. Mercer, we were not informed you were coming to site. Julian walked past her and stopped in front of Naomi, leaving enough distance that he did not crowd her. "Ms. Reed," he said. "My name is Julian Mercer." Naomi's eyes did not soften. "I know your name." He accepted that. "I am here to review what happened." "No," Naomi said. "You are here because people started watching." The hallway went still. Tasha's camera held on them. Victor's jaw tightened behind Julian. Evan, breathing hard from taking the stairs 2 at a time, stepped up beside his boss with the tablet open. Julian did not defend himself. There were moments when a defense was just another way of taking up space that belonged to the truth. "You are right," he said. "I saw it because people were watching. But I am here now and I need to see the documents you tried to. Give my office." Naomi held the shoebox tighter. "I already showed them." "Show me." The request was simple. That was why it hurt. Naomi looked at his outstretched hand, then at Denise, then at the notice on the door. "Do you know how many times I have heard that?" Julian lowered his hand. "I do not." "Then start there." For a moment no one moved. Then Maya slid off the box, walked to her mother, and touched the edge of the shoebox. "Mama," she whispered. "Maybe he will look." That sentence did what no executive order could have done. Naomi's face shifted, not into trust, but into exhaustion so deep it had no room left for refusal. She set the box on top of a cardboard carton and opened it. The lid bent backward. Inside were years of a life flattened into paper. She did not dump it out. She selected the hardship form first, because even under pressure, she knew the order of evidence mattered. Julian took it with both hands. Received. Ridgeway Court Leasing Office. October 10th. 9:17 a.m. Child with asthma. Review requested before legal action. Attached. Hospital discharge paper, school nurse note, pay stubs, partial payment receipts. He handed it to Evan. "Scan this now." Denise stepped forward. "Mr. Mercer, that copy was not accepted as valid in the system. The upload was marked unreadable." Naomi turned toward her slowly. "You never even touched it." Denise kept her eyes on Julian. "Our regional process requires electronic verification." Julian looked at the paper, then at Denise. "This is readable. The office receives many documents. We cannot authenticate every tenant claim on site. Your stamp authenticated it." The words landed in the hallway with a force all their own. Denise opened her mouth, then closed it. Evan's tablet chimed softly as he uploaded the scan. Mark Ellison's tablet chimed 1 second later. Then another device. Then Denise's phone. A system alert had been triggered by the new scan matching a previously rejected document. Evan looked down and the blood seemed to leave his face. "Sir," he said quietly, "you need to see this." Julian stepped beside him. The screen showed Naomi's rejected hardship file, then the fresh scan, then an automated comparison. Match probability, 98.7%. Original rejection reason, unreadable. Rejecting user, Denise Caldwell. Timestamp, October 11th, 6:42 p.m. Manual override. Hardship hold removed. Julian did not look at Denise yet. He scrolled lower. Linked household medical note, present. Linked school note, present. Rent payment history, partial payment accepted. Fee dispute, open. Tenant transition outcome, declined assistance. He tapped that line. A smaller window opened showing 3 outreach attempts. Each one marked completed. Each one marked tenant declined. Each one entered by the same user group, Ridgeway Regional Transition. Then Evan opened the audit comparison from the 31 unit list. It filled the screen with names, unit numbers, status codes, and identical phrases repeated like a machine had learned how to lie in a human voice. Declined assistance. Declined assistance. Declined assistance.
No verified vulnerability. No verified vulnerability. No verified vulnerability.
Naomi watched Julian read. She watched his face lose the polished stillness men like him were trained to wear. "What is that?" she asked. Julian did not answer fast enough. Victor did. "Internal documents not relevant to this possession." Julian turned. "Do not speak for me." Victor's expression hardened. The polite mask was still there, but cracks had formed around the edges. Julian, this is why I wanted privacy. Raw system data without context can be misleading. Then give me context. The portfolio has a vacancy deadline tied to renovation financing. Transition services were offered. Some residents did not engage. Regional teams made eligibility determinations. Julian held up the hardship form. This resident engaged. Victor's eyes flicked to the paper, then away. One document does not invalidate a process. Naomi laughed once, a small sound with no humor in it. Everyone looked at her. She reached into the shoebox and pulled out a library printout, creased down the middle. Then maybe this one does. She handed it to Julian. It was the portal page she had printed for 15 cents, the one that claimed she had declined relocation calls. While she was at work, on the bus, and waiting at the emergency room pharmacy. Beside each entry was a time. Naomi pointed to the second one. That says I declined a call at 3:12 p.m. on October 19th. She reached deeper into the box and pulled out a timesheet from Rosebridge Senior Care. I was clocked in until 3:45. Another page. A pharmacy receipt. That one says I declined at 6:08. I was picking up his medication. She nodded toward Caleb. There is a timestamp. Julian took the pages. Evan photographed them. Mark Ellison stopped pretending not to listen. Ryan, the young compliance officer who had refused to sticker Maya's project again, looked directly at Denise for the first time. Denise's mouth had become a line. Those records would need full review, she said. Then review them, Naomi replied. Right now. Tasha repeated softly from behind the phone. Right now. The hallway picked it up. Not loudly. Not like a chant. Just a murmur from people who had watched too many doors close. Right now. Right now. Right now. Julian looked down at the tablet again. The evidence had shifted the story, but only halfway. It proved Naomi had not lied. It proved the file had been altered or mishandled. It proved her hardship form had been received and rejected falsely. But it did not yet prove who had ordered the pattern or why 31 households carried the same lie. Then Evan tapped the batch clearance folder. Sir, he said, there is a note attached to the unit list. Julian read it. All remaining Ridgeway units must be moved to clearance status prior to investor visual review. Minimize exceptions. Vulnerability flags require executive-level override, unless tenant non-engagement is documented. He scrolled to the bottom. Requested by Victor Sloan. Approved through JM Delegated Seal. Naomi saw the initials before Julian could hide the screen. JM. Her eyes went from the tablet to his face. That is you. Julian looked at the letters. For years his initials had opened doors, approved budgets, funded clinics, signed speeches, and stamped policies people praised him for. Now they sat beside a list that had nearly put Naomi's children outside in the rain. I did not approve this clearance, he said. Naomi's face did not change. But it still used your name. That was the truth he could not step around. The hallway did not need a legal explanation. It understood responsibility more clearly than any board packet ever had. Victor moved closer. Julian, do not make a statement based on incomplete information. Julian looked at him. Did you request non-engagement documentation to override vulnerability flags? Victor said nothing. Did you know hardship forms were being rejected after office stamps? Still nothing. Did you know my seal was being used to batch approve evictions before review? Victor's silence became the loudest thing in the hallway. Denise looked down at her clipboard. Mark Ellison looked away. Ryan took one step back from the apartment door, as if distance could separate him from what he had been part of. Julian turned to Naomi. Your eviction is paused pending executive review. Naomi did not move. Paused is not the same as wrong. He nodded slowly. No, it is not. Caleb coughed again, and Naomi reached for him without looking, her hand finding his shoulder by instinct. Julian watched that gesture. A mother's body answering before power finished speaking. He turned toward the maintenance crew. Nothing else leaves this unit. Then to Mark. Inventory stops. Then to Denise. Open every Ridgeway hardship file entered under your regional office in the last 60 days. Denise's eyes widened. Here. Here. Victor stepped in. That is beyond site protocol. Julian looked at him. So was my seal on that notice. Tasha's phone captured the moment Julian reached toward the eviction notice taped to Naomi's door. He did not tear it down. Not yet. He placed Naomi's stamped hardship form over it again, exactly where she had placed it before, covering the red seal with the proof his system had ignored. Then he turned to Evan. Pull the full 31 files. Evan nodded. Already loading. Naomi looked at the covered notice, then at Julian. For the first time, there was something in her expression besides anger and exhaustion. Not trust. Not forgiveness. Recognition that the wall had cracked. Only cracked. Behind them, Victor Sloan's phone began to ring. He looked at the name on the screen and silenced it quickly, but Julian saw it before the display went dark. Board chair. The investor walkthrough was less than 90 minutes away. The files were opening. The livestream was still running. And somewhere inside Mercer Housing Trust, a system built to make families disappear had just left its first clear fingerprint. The crisis began with a sound so small most people in the hallway almost missed it. A single notification tone came from Mark Ellison's tablet, then another from Denise Caldwell's phone, then another from Evan's laptop. 3 clean digital chimes, polite and bloodless, announcing that someone far above the hallway had decided the truth was becoming inconvenient. Mark looked down first. His face changed before he could stop it. Denise read her screen and straightened. Victor Sloan slipped his phone into his coat pocket and stepped forward with the calm authority of a man who had spent his career turning emergencies into procedures. This site action is no longer under executive interruption, he said. Julian turned slowly. What did you just say? Victor held up his phone, not to show the screen, but to show that the order had arrived from somewhere official. The board has convened an emergency call. Until legal counsel completes review, all field teams are instructed to preserve the existing court order and continue securing the vacant delivery schedule. Naomi felt the words move through the hallway before she fully understood them. Preserve. Continue. Securing. Vacant. Every word was polished smooth enough to hide the harm inside it. She looked at Julian, then at the notice, then at her children. You said it was paused. Julian's face tightened. It is. Victor did not raise his voice. That was what made him dangerous. Julian, you do not have unilateral authority to suspend a court process possession during an active redevelopment milestone without counsel present. You know that. The legal order stands until formally stayed. My company created the record that produced that order. And your company will review it through the proper channels. The proper channels put her belongings in the hallway. Victor turned toward Naomi with the expression of a man preparing to sound compassionate. Ms. Reed, no one is minimizing your situation. However, this building is part of a larger relocation process, affecting multiple households and millions of dollars in public-private commitments. We cannot allow a live stream to override a legal framework. Naomi looked at him for a long second. You keep saying framework because it sounds better than family. The hallway murmured. Tasha's phone moved closer. Victor's eyes flicked toward the camera, and for the first time irritation flashed through the polish. This recording is creating a distorted picture. Tasha answered from behind the phone. Then stop doing ugly things in public. Denise stepped beside Victor, newly confident under his protection. The crew should continue. Ryan, the young compliance officer, did not move. Mark Ellison looked at Victor, then at Julian, waiting for power to choose a shape. The maintenance workers stood frozen by the doorway. Victor's voice sharpened just slightly. Continue. One worker reached for a box near the threshold. It was not a large box. It held Maya's school folders, Caleb's dinosaur pajamas, a plastic bag of pharmacy receipts, and a picture frame wrapped in a dish towel. Naomi moved toward it instinctively. Do not touch that. The worker stopped. Denise turned on Naomi. Ms. Reed, interfering with removal can create additional legal consequences. Legal consequences? Naomi repeated. Something in her voice had gone quiet enough to make the hallway listen harder. My son's medicine is in one of those boxes. My daughter's school papers are in one of those boxes. My whole life is in these boxes because your office lied and your system called it clean. Victor looked at Julian. This is exactly why we cannot litigate facts in a hallway. No, Julian said. This is exactly where facts belong when the office refused to look at them. Victor stepped closer to him. You need to think beyond this moment. Julian almost answered, but Naomi spoke first. That is the problem with men like you. Victor turned. Naomi still held the shoebox, but now she was standing straighter than she had all morning. The rain tapped against the windows behind her. Her children watched from beside Mrs. Alvarez. You always want people like me to think beyond this moment because this moment is where your decisions finally have a face. You want a meeting. You want counsel. You want review. I wanted those things too. I asked for them before my kids had to watch strangers carry out their blankets. Victor's jaw tightened. Ms. Reed, emotional appeals do not change documentation. Naomi opened the shoebox again and pulled out the hardship form, the timesheet, the pharmacy receipt, the library printout, and the call log. One by one, she laid them on the top of the box nearest her, each sheet placed carefully, edges aligned, as if building a table where none had been offered. Then look at documentation. Victor did not. Instead, he turned to Mark. Mark, proceed according to board instruction. That was the moment Julian understood Victor's strategy. Do not argue the truth. Drown it in hierarchy. Make everyone wait for permission while the deadline moved forward. Once the apartment was empty, once the investor walkthrough happened, once the official record showed the unit secured, Naomi's papers would become an appeal after the fact. A sad story. A pending review. A closed door with a new lock. Julian looked down the hallway at the open apartment. Inside, the refrigerator still held Maya's drawing under the crab magnet. Caleb's small sneakers sat by the couch. A pot rested on the stove. The home had not yet become the past. But it was minutes away. Then another phone rang. This time it was Naomi's. She flinched when she saw the screen. Baltimore City Family Support Office. She answered with her free hand and turned away, but the hallway had become too quiet for privacy. This is Naomi Reed. She listened. Her shoulders drew in. No, ma'am. My children are with me. They are safe. A pause. No, we do not have another address yet because this is a wrongful eviction. Another pause. I understand. I understand the school has to report housing instability, but I am not neglecting them. I have their medicine. I have their documents. I am trying to keep them in their home. Maya's eyes filled, but she did not cry. Caleb looked at Mrs. Alvarez and whispered, Are we in trouble? Mrs. Alvarez hugged him closer. Julian heard the question and felt his composure fracture. Victor heard it too and used the moment like a lever. This is becoming a child welfare matter, he said quietly to Julian. All the more reason to let professionals handle it and remove the family from the site before this escalates. Naomi ended the call and looked at him. Remove the family, she said. That is me. That is them. Say it plain. Victor did not. He looked at Denise. Get the remaining essential items separated. The unit needs to be cleared. Denise nodded. Ryan, start with the kitchen. Ryan did not move. I said start with the kitchen. Ryan looked at Naomi, then at Maya, then at Julian. I am sorry, but I do not think we should continue until legal reviews the hardship hold. Denise's face flushed. You are not paid to think. The words came out sharp enough that even Victor looked at her. Ryan lowered his eyes, but he still did not enter the apartment. A small refusal. A human pause. Then Mark Ellison stepped in, older, trained, obedient. He crossed the threshold with his tablet and reached for the stack of papers on the kitchen counter. Naomi's head snapped toward him. Those are mine. They are being documented. They are my children's school forms. She moved to the doorway, but Denise stepped into her path. Not touching her. Not needing to. The hallway itself became the barrier. Julian moved at the same time. Mark, put them down. Mark froze with the papers in hand. Victor's voice cut through. Julian, you are creating personal liability for yourself and the company. Julian did not look at him. Put them down. Slowly, Mark returned the papers to the counter. Naomi exhaled once, but the relief lasted less than a second because Victor had already raised his phone. I am calling counsel on speaker, he said. Let us make this clear. The call connected to a woman named Marjorie Bell, General Counsel for Mercer Housing Trust. Her voice filled the hallway from Victor's. Phone precise and detached. She stated that the company should avoid any admission of wrongdoing on site, that the court order remained active, that the executive seal issue required internal audit, and that tenant documentation could be preserved without reversing the possession. Every sentence was reasonable in the way a closed gate is reasonable if you only study the hinges. Julian listened, and with each word Naomi's hope thinned. He could see it happening. Not dramatically. She did not collapse. She did not shout. She simply began to gather the most important papers back into the shoebox, as if some part of her had understood that powerful people had found the language they needed to leave her where she was. "Marjorie," Julian said when counsel paused, "are you aware the hardship document was stamped received before legal possession was processed?" "I am aware there are allegations." "It is not an allegation. I am holding the document." "Then preserve it." "Are you aware 31 units show identical non-engagement language?" "That is precisely why internal review is necessary." "And while internal review happens, does this family lose the unit?" A pause. "The company should not make factual determinations in a hallway." Naomi closed the shoebox. The sound of the lid settling into place was soft, but Julian heard finality in it. She looked at Maya. "Get your backpack." Maya stood slowly. Caleb picked up the blue blanket and the unplugged air purifier cord dragged across the floor until Naomi gently took it from his hand. "We cannot carry that, baby. But it helps." "I know." She had no place to plug it in. No place. That was the phrase. Not delayed housing. Not transition services. No place. Julian saw the whole thing then, the elegant trap. The court order would continue. Naomi would be moved into temporary limbo. The company would investigate itself. The investor walkthrough would happen. The board would survive the news cycle. And the woman with the shoebox would be asked to keep proving the truth from wherever she slept next. Tasha lowered the phone slightly, her voice breaking. "Naomi, I can drive you somewhere." Naomi nodded without looking at her. Pride had been forced to make room for survival. "Thank you." Victor exhaled as if order had been restored. Denise gave a quick gesture to Mark. The crew moved again. One man lifted the box with Maya's school folders. Another reached for the air purifier. Caleb made a small sound, not a cry, just a breath catching before it could become one. Julian looked at the child, then at the notice, then at Victor. "Stop." No one moved for half a second. Victor closed his eyes briefly. "Julian." "I said stop." "On what authority?" Victor asked. There it was. The challenge. Not moral. Not human. Structural. On what authority does conscience interrupt procedure? Julian took the folded speech from his coat pocket. The cream paper had softened at the edges from the rain on his hands. He looked at the line he had planned to deliver at City Hall. No family should ever be made invisible by the system meant to protect them. Then he tore the speech once down the middle. Not dramatically. Not for the camera. Because the words no longer deserved to exist unless he was willing to stand inside them. He handed both halves to Evan. "On mine." Victor's face went still. "The board can remove you from operational control. Let them try. The financing can collapse. Then it was not worth saving. You will expose the company." Julian looked at Naomi. She stood in the doorway with a shoebox, 2 children, and no reason to believe him. "The company is already exposed." Marjorie Bell's voice came through Victor's phone. "Julian, do not make a unilateral statement." Julian turned toward Tasha's camera, then toward the residents in the hallway, then toward the open doors where people were watching with the fragile hope of those who had learned hope could be punished. "This possession is suspended by executive order pending independent review," he said. "Not internal. Independent. No belongings leave this apartment. No locks are changed. No investor walkthrough enters this building today." Victor stepped toward him. "You cannot promise that." Julian looked at Evan. "Record this." Evan lifted his phone. "I am." Julian continued, voice steadier now. "If the board disagrees, they can put their names on the decision to remove a mother and 2 children after receiving evidence their file was falsified." Denise's face drained. Mark lowered his tablet. Ryan stepped away from the kitchen entrance as if the air had finally returned to the hallway. For the first time all morning, Victor Sloan looked less certain. Not defeated. Not yet. Cornered. Then he did the thing cornered men with power often do. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folder Naomi had never seen before. Before anyone turns Ms. Reed into a symbol, he said, perhaps we should review the full tenant history. Naomi stiffened. Julian looked at the folder. What is that? Victor opened it just enough for a page to show. Prior lease violations. Noise complaints. Late payment pattern. Unauthorized occupants noted in the file. Naomi's face went cold. That is not true. Victor did not look at her. He looked at the camera. There is always more context. The hallway shifted again. Online comments flickered. Some believed immediately. Some doubted. Some began doing what crowds do when a woman's dignity becomes debatable. Naomi saw the change on Tasha's screen. Her name turning into argument. Her motherhood turning into evidence for strangers to weigh. Victor had found the dirtiest weapon left. If he could not defend the system, he would stain the person it harmed. Naomi held the shoebox to her chest and whispered, no, not to Victor. Not to Julian. To the old terror of being turned into a story she could not control. Julian looked at the folder, then at Naomi, then at Victor's polished hand holding papers that had appeared exactly when compassion began winning. And for the first time, he wondered not whether Naomi's file contained lies, but how many lies had been prepared in advance for any tenant who refused to disappear quietly. Victor Sloan held the folder like it was a weapon made of paper, and for one breath, everyone in the hallway understood what he was trying to do. Naomi Reed was no longer just fighting an eviction notice. She was fighting the version of herself powerful people had prepared in case she ever became too difficult to ignore. Victor opened the folder wider, letting the first page show enough for Tasha's camera to catch bold phrases near the top. Repeated late payment. Tenant disturbance. Unauthorized adult occupant. Pattern of non-compliance. Naomi stared at the words as if they had been written in another language and somehow still knew her name. That is not my file, she said. Victor's voice stayed smooth. It is the company's record. Then the company's record is lying again. Denise Caldwell looked relieved now, almost eager. Those notes were entered over several months. Julian did not take the folder from Victor. He looked at Evan. Pull the original source documents for every claim in that summary. Victor's eyes narrowed. That is not necessary right now. It became necessary the moment you tried to use it in front of her children. Evan's fingers moved quickly across the tablet. Mark Ellison stepped closer, not to intervene but to see. Ryan stood near the kitchen doorway, his face pale, hands empty. Tasha kept filming, but the phone no longer felt like a spectacle. It felt like a witness stand. Naomi reached into the shoebox with shaking hands, not because she doubted herself, but because she knew how easily doubt could be planted in other people. Late payment pattern, she repeated. She pulled out 3 rent receipts and placed them on the box. September paid. October partial accepted. November hardship pending. She pulled out the maintenance photographs. Disturbance complaint? The night they claimed I was making noise, I was at Rosebridge Senior Care from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. She found the timesheet, unfolded it, and smoothed the crease with the side of her thumb. Unauthorized adult occupant? That was Mrs. Alvarez watching my kids when my son had a fever and I still had to work. Mrs. Alvarez stepped forward, chin lifted. I live downstairs. Apartment 2A. I am 71 years old, and I have been on that lease since before Mercer bought this building. The hallway murmured again, but this time the sound carried anger with direction. Evan looked up from the tablet. Sir, the summary does not match the attachments. Julian's eyes stayed on Victor. Explain. Evan turned the screen so Julian could see. The late payment record includes fees under dispute as unpaid rent. The disturbance complaint has no caller name, no security report, and no audio record. The unauthorized occupant note was entered after a camera timestamp showed Mrs. Alvarez entering with the children. It was manually classified as lease risk. Julian looked at Denise. By whom? Evan answered before she could. Denise Caldwell. Denise's mouth opened. That was based on regional guidance. Julian turned back to Victor. Whose guidance? Victor's expression did not change. But something in the set of his shoulders gave him away. The regional team uses standardized risk language. That was not my question. Naomi watched Julian now not with trust, but with the exhausted focus of someone who knew the next answer could decide whether the world saw her as a mother or a problem. Evan scrolled deeper. There is an attachment chain, he said. The summary was generated last night at 11:52 p.m. Julian looked sharply at Victor. Last night. Evan nodded. After the batch clearance was approved. It was labeled Tenant Narrative Packet. The phrase sat in the hallway like a bad smell. Tenant Narrative Packet. Not a legal record. Not a full history. A narrative. A story built after the fact in case the truth needed competition. Tasha whispered. They made a smear file. Victor finally lost a fraction of his polish. That is an irresponsible characterization. Naomi looked at him. What would you call it? He did not answer her. He looked at Julian. Every major transition requires reputational risk preparation. You know this. If a tenant goes public, the company needs context. Context, Julian said. You mean accusations. I mean pattern documentation. A pattern you created. Victor's jaw tightened. Be careful. Julian stepped closer. No. You were careful. That was the whole design. Evan's tablet chimed again. He stared at the screen, then turned it toward Julian with the slow movement of someone who knows the room is about to change. There is more. The new file was not from Naomi's folder. It was from the archived property acquisition records for Ridgeway Court, digitized. When Mercer Housing Trust bought the building, a search for the old property codes had been triggered by the seal audit. Julian saw the date first. March 1994. Then the unit number. Building 1, Apartment 2C. Then the tenant name. Elaine Mercer. The hallway blurred at the edges. For a second, Julian did not hear the rain or the phones or Victor's breathing. He saw his mother's framed rent receipt in his closet. $87.50. Paid in cash. He saw her hands over a stove flame, warming a mug because the heat had gone out. He saw a towel under a window. He saw himself at 9 years old, believing cold was something families endured quietly when they could not afford to complain. Evan spoke softly. Your mother lived here. Julian took the tablet. Ridgeway Court had changed names twice since then. Ownership had shifted, merged, renamed, and folded into holding companies. But the building was the same. The old file contained a late warning issued 2 days after payment, a maintenance complaint closed without repair, and a non-compliance note claiming tenant failed to cooperate with property access. At the bottom was a move-out notice. Fee balance unresolved. Possession transferred. Julian's throat tightened. Not because he had found a sentimental connection, but because he recognized the machinery. It was older than Mercer Housing Trust. Older than Victor. Older than Denise. The same kind of paperwork had once pushed his mother out of this building, and he had built a company promising to end that kind of harm, only to let men in clean offices modernize it under his own seal. Naomi saw his face change. What is it? Julian looked up slowly. My mother lived in Ridgeway Court. No one spoke. She was pushed out with the same kind of fees, the same kind of notes, the same kind of record that made her look like the problem. Victor's voice came low and urgent. Julian, do not bring personal history into a legal matter. Julian turned on him. You brought my name into 31 evictions. Through a delegated rule embedded in board-approved operations. Who wrote the rule? Victor did not answer. Evan did. Drafted by Asset Management. Final edits. By Victor Sloan. Implemented 6 months ago. Emergency Clearance Framework. Julian looked at the screen. The rule allowed executive seal application for hardship households if non-engagement was documented by regional staff. It did not require voice confirmation. It did not require in-person review. It did not require the executive whose seal was used to read a single file. It needed only one thing, a record saying the tenant had not engaged. Denise created the records. Victor used them to override the protections. The seal made it official. The investor deadline made it urgent. The smear packet made resistance look dishonest. The whole truth did not arrive like lightning. It arrived like a door unlocking in stages. Naomi's stamped hardship form was not lost. It was rejected. Her calls were not missed. They were converted into non-engagement. Her son's asthma was not unknown. It was buried beneath a false classification. The 31 families were not isolated cases. They were a clearance strategy. And Julian's seal was not stolen in the simple way he had hoped. It had been made usable by a system he signed without reading closely enough, a system designed to turn his distance into permission. That was the twist that hurt most. He had not ordered Naomi's eviction, but his absence had signed it. Julian turned toward Naomi, and there was no billionaire left in his face, no podium, no polished founder, no man protected by language. Only someone finally standing inside the cost of his own blind trust. "Ms. Reed," he said, and his voice nearly failed on her name. "You were right. The paper was lying. The record was lying. And my company gave the lie power." Naomi held the shoebox against her chest. Maya stood beside her silent. Caleb leaned into Mrs. Alvarez with the blue blanket around his shoulders. Victor took one step back, sensing the room slipping beyond his control. "This is not a full legal finding," he said. Julian did not look at him. "No. It is a full moral one." He faced Tasha's camera, then the residents in the open doorways, then the staff wearing his company's logo. The eviction of Naomi Reed was based on a falsified hardship record, a misclassified medical vulnerability, and an executive seal applied through a delegated process I should never have allowed to exist. The same review begins now for every Ridgeway household in that batch. Victor's face hardened. "You are exposing us to enormous liability." Julian finally turned back to him. "No, Victor. You did that when you treated families like obstacles and called it a transition." Denise looked toward the stairs as if she wanted to disappear down them. Mark Ellison closed his tablet. Ryan picked up Caleb's air purifier and carried it back inside the apartment without waiting for permission. No one stopped him. Julian reached for the eviction notice. This time he removed it from Naomi's door carefully, not tearing it, not crumpling it, because evidence mattered. He held it beside her stamped hardship form. 2 pieces of paper. One created to erase her. One she had carried to prove she was still there. The red seal at the bottom of the notice caught the hallway light. Julian looked at it for a long second. That seal had once meant authority. Now it meant responsibility. He handed both documents to Evan. "Preserve these." Naomi watched the notice leave the door. The rectangle of clean paint beneath it looked almost strange, like the apartment itself had been holding its breath. But the crisis was not over. The investor team was still coming. The board was still calling. 30 other doors were still at risk. Victor Sloan was still standing in the hallway, calculating his next move. Yet the story had turned. Not because a billionaire arrived with money, because a mother's shoebox had outlasted a corporation's lie, and the one mark meant to end her claim had finally led back to the man responsible for making it true. 3 months later, the brown shoebox no longer lived under Naomi Reed's bed. It sat on a shelf in the Ridgeway Community Legal Clinic, not hidden, not bent, not carried like a shield against people who refused to listen. Maya had written the label in careful blue marker, "Papers that told the truth." Beside it, in a simple frame, was the notice that had once been taped to apartment 3B. Julian had wanted to lock it in a company archive. Naomi had said no. People need to see what a lie looks like when it is printed clean. So there it stayed, the red seal still visible but no longer powerful. Under it was a small brass plaque with words Naomi chose herself. "A seal is not justice. A signature is not truth. People are." Apartment 3B still had the same morning light through the kitchen window, but the mold above the stove was gone, the bathroom faucet worked, and Caleb's air purifier hummed softly beside his bed. Maya's science project, the one almost thrown away, sat on top of the refrigerator next to a new permission slip Naomi had already signed. On Friday evening, Naomi closed the shoebox after adding one more paper. Her official counsel badge. Caleb looked at it and asked, "Do we still have to keep all those receipts?" Naomi smiled, tired but whole. "Yes, baby. But now they have to read them." Outside, the hallway lights no longer flickered. Mrs. Alvarez knocked once and came in with peaches in a bowl. Downstairs, in the community room, residents were gathering for the first meeting, led by someone who knew exactly what it felt like to stand on the wrong side of a locked door. Naomi picked up the shoebox not because she was afraid anymore, but because some proof deserved to walk into the room with its head held high.